This is one of the most outrageous political stories of the year, and yet the mainstream media is doing everything it can to downplay it. But make no mistake, what just happened exposes not only the radical double standards within the Labour Party, but also Keir Starmer's complete refusal to stand up for the rule of law, women's rights. The Supreme Court recently issued a landmark ruling, a decision that cut through all the political noise and reaffirmed something the vast majority of the British public already understands. Trans women are not legally women when it comes to single-sex spaces and services. This ruling was seen as a victory for clarity, safety, and common sense, especially for women and girls who have been crying out for legal protections in places like changing rooms, refugees, and sports competitions. The government publicly said it welcomed the ruling. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, EHRC, welcomed the ruling. Baroness Faulkner, who chairs the EHRC, praised the clarity it brought and emphasised that biological sex must be the foundation for single-sex services. But behind the scenes, a completely different story was unfolding within Labour ranks. According to leaked WhatsApp messages obtained by the Mail on Sunday, at least 2 Labour ministers, Dame Angela Eagle and Sir Chris Bryant, were actively plotting ways to defy the ruling, not challenge it legally, not appeal it through Parliament, but organise against it to undermine its implementation while publicly pretending to support it. This wasn't a few backbenchers mouthing off. These were serving ministers communicating in an LGBT plus Labour MPs WhatsApp group. They were planning a post-Easter meeting to, quote, decide a way forwards and organise in response to the court's decision. In plain English, they were laying out a strategy to push back against the Supreme Court ruling using political backchannels. Angela Eagle, unbelievably, tried to downplay the ruling, saying, "The ruling is not as catastrophic as it seems, but the EHRC guidance might be." She went on to say that Labour needed to keep pushing their manifesto agenda, which includes support for gender identity ideology and policies that erase biological sex in law and practice. Chris Bryant, meanwhile, piled on criticism of Baroness Faulkner for standing up for women's rights and acknowledging the clear biological distinctions that the court just reaffirmed. This is not a debate. This is an attempted sabotage of the legal system. And what has Keir Starmer done about it? Absolutely nothing. No condemnation, no clarification, not even a personal statement acknowledging the Supreme Court's ruling. Starmer is keeping silent, because silence is easier than standing up to the extremists in his own party. Let's be crystal clear. This isn't about LGBT rights. No one's saying trans people should be denied dignity, safety, or protection under the law. But there is a line, and when activists and now elected officials try to erase that line entirely, they're not fighting for equality. They're enforcing an ideology, one that overwrites women's rights, freedom of speech, and legal clarity in the name of inclusion. But it doesn't stop there. Over the weekend, thousands of trans rights activists took to the streets of London for an emergency demonstration in response to the Supreme Court decision. What began as a protest ended in vandalism and disgrace. Statues in Parliament Square were defaced. The suffragist Millicent Fawcett's banner was spray-painted with the words "fag rights" and a heart. Another read, "Trans rights are human rights," sprayed onto the memorial to Jan Christian Smuts. Let that sink in. These activists, claiming to stand for rights and tolerance, defaced monuments dedicated to women's suffrage and historic leadership, all because they didn't get their way in court. And where was Keir Starmer during all this? Nowhere. He hasn't condemned the vandalism, he hasn't supported the EHRC chair, who's now facing abuse simply for doing her job, and he hasn't taken any action against Eagle, Bryant, or any of the Labour MPs involved in this scheme to quietly defy the ruling. Downing Street says no action will be taken. They claim the messages didn't technically break any laws or directly call to undermine the court. But that's missing the point. These MPs weren't just chatting, they were organising, plotting behind closed doors to find a way to push back against a judgment they disagreed with, all while pretending to support it publicly. This is the very definition of two-faced governance. What message does this send to women and girls across Britain who just want clear legal protections in private spaces? What message does it send to the courts that their rulings can be ignored if they don't suit the Labour narrative? We are watching, in real time, the Labour Party pick sides. And they're not picking the side of the rule of law. They're not picking the side of women's safety. They're picking the side of radical ideology, and doing everything they can to keep the public from seeing it. Well, now we do see it. And come the next election, the question is simple. Do you want leaders who respect the law, or leaders who only follow it when it suits them? Because Starmer's silence speaks volumes. In other news, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has lashed out at trans activists who deface several monuments, including some dedicated to feminist heroes. Police launched an investigation into what was described as an emergency demonstration by protesters after 7 statues were vandalized in Parliament Square on Saturday. The Metropolitan Police said the statues were daubed with a graffiti during the demonstration, which was held in response to a Supreme Court ruling on the definition of a woman. No arrests have been made in connection with the criminal damage, but officers are appealing for witnesses to come forward. Parliament Square is home to 12 statues of political figures, including Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, and Mahatma Gandhi. Plans are underway to remove the graffiti, but specialist equipment will need to be brought in, the Metropolitan Police said. In response to the damage, the Home Secretary condemned the vandalism, calling it disgraceful. Criminal damage like this, including to statues of men and women who fought for freedom and justice like Winston Churchill, Nelson Mandela, and Millicent Fawcett, is disgraceful. It is right the police are investigating, she said. We are strengthening the law to better respect and protect important memorials. She added, freedom of speech and protest are important in our democracy, but this kind of criminal damage is completely unacceptable. The protest was in response to a landmark Supreme Court ruling delivered on Wednesday that confirmed the terms woman and sex in the 2010 Equality Act refer to a biological woman and biological sex. The ruling means transgender women with a gender recognition certificate could potentially be excluded from single-sex spaces if deemed proportionate. Activists at the demonstration demanded trans liberation and trans rights now, with many waving flags and holding banners as they marched towards St. James's Park. The ruling sparked controversy among various groups, with transgender activists expressing outrage. Chief Superintendent Stuart Bell, who led the policing operation, said, criminal damage and vandalism like this has no place on the streets of London and spoils the area for locals and those visiting. What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you've not yet already, make sure you do drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British content. Thank you, take care, goodbye.